Hi, everyone. Welcome to Navigating Employee Impact of Anti-LGBTQ plus legislation. Thank you so much for being here with us today. As you are all coming into the space, we just had a lovely check-in question. So if you could just introduce yourself in the chat. So your name, your pronouns, the industry you're in, and then of course our favorite question, what's your favorite summer activity? We're right here on the edge of summer, you know, Pride is lovely in June. So what's your favorite summer activity? My name is Dane. I'm going to be kind of your webinar support today. So if you have any issues that come up, feel free to message me directly and I will help you. As a note, we are recording this webinar. We will send out the link and any resources that are shared here today to you as well. And then if you have any questions during this time, please go ahead and just drop them in the chat or use the Q&A function and you can drop them there. We will do our best to try to get to those during the webinar, or if we have time for Q&A later, we'll get to those then. But we will do our best to answer those questions. Let's see, I think that's it for me. So Mara, I think we can go ahead and get started if you'd like to take it.
Great, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as Dane mentioned, we're so excited to have you here to be part of a discussion about how different organizations from all across the country are navigating the employee impact of anti-LGBTQIA legislation on their employees. So we're going to start with an overview of our agenda, and then do some introductions, and then go from there.
Sorry, I'm a little bit distracted. I was trying to write my name and pronouns in the chat, but I will just keep us moving along. So first, before we start, just want to start by acknowledging the horrible anti-LGBTQ plus rhetoric and policies that are harming our communities every day. If you're a member of the LGBTQ plus community and you're on the call today, just want you all to know that we care about you and we want you to feel safe, respected, and valued today and every day. And that's really why we're here today. And so today we'll start with introductions. Mara and I will introduce ourselves, and then we'll give our panelists each an opportunity to introduce themselves. We'll then spend a couple minutes talking about current challenges across the United States, and we'll ask you a poll during that section. And then we'll spend the majority of our time today around Q&A with our panelists, and hearing really their thoughts around how we can support LGBTQ plus employees, as well as the communities that we serve. And so I'm happy to move into my introduction first. I'll start a little bit just by telling you about Edgility, and then I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So at Edgility, everything we do centers around equity. It's at the heart of all of our work. And so we work to create processes and work towards outcomes that focus on greater equity by closing wage gaps, by closing opportunity gaps, and by building leadership benches that are reflective of the communities that we serve. And we do that through three main service lines. We do it by placing exceptional leaders, by building equitable compensation programs, and by reimagining talent systems. As an organization, we have worked with social justice organizations from across the United States from the very beginning of our organization, and so we understand what is important to you all. A little bit about myself. I go by Jen. My pronouns are he, her, hers, and I am a member of Edgility's LGBTQ plus ERG. I actually started my career as a scientist, and I was a cancer researcher for 15 years, both here in the US and abroad in London, UK. Before I became a mom, and when I became a mom, I no longer saw space for myself as an academic scientist. And so I pivoted all of those data research and analysis skills into talent equity and pay equity. And I am a founding member of Edgility's compensation team and have worked closely with one of their co-founding partners to build that practice. So bring a lot of institutional knowledge to the work that I do, as well as I have worked with nonprofits and charter schools. Those tend to be my two primary focus areas. And so bring also sector-wide knowledge around creating talent systems and compensation programs for nonprofits and charter schools. And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Mara and just let her introduce herself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Mara Cooper. I am part of Edgility's search team. So I get to work with organizations from all across the country, social justice organizations, community-based organizations, education programs, schools, helping them find really great equity-focused leaders to join their teams. I started at Mastery Charter Schools in Philadelphia back in 2002 as an English teacher. I was there for 20 years. I served on their post-secondary initiatives team and then moved into doing talent work in 2017. And then I joined the Edgility team back in August of last year. So all of the work I've done either at Mastery as an educator and helping to serve all of our high schools and elementary schools, as well as now, has really been about impact that I can create in the jobs that I take on. So thank you all so much for joining us today. So I want to give our great panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves. They're each going to take about 2 minutes, introduce themselves and their work, and we'll start with Paul.
Hi, everyone. Try to keep this short and sweet so we can get to the reason you all are here. So my name is Paul Duchesne, and my pronouns are he, him, and I identify as gay, male, and Latino. I am the Chief Operating Officer at the National Math and Science Initiative. We go by NIMSI. NIMSI is a national nonprofit focused on building strong STEM programs in districts and CMOs across the US by increasing access to rigorous STEM coursework. We focus on students who identify as female or female presenting, students living in rural or military communities, and also Black, Brown, and Indigenous kids. And we partner directly with districts and school leaders and teachers in these schools. I live in Texas, normally in Austin, but temporarily in El Paso for a year. And I live with my husband, Michael, and our dog, Roscoe.
Thank you. Next, Shauna.
Hi there, my name is Shauna Madison. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm currently in Oakley, California on Miwok land of the Miwok people. I currently work as a director of people, culture, and equity at the National Center for Lesbian Rights. I also do in-house counsel work for them, general counsel work for them. And prior to being at NCLR, I was an employment discrimination attorney, and I litigated primarily on behalf of Black and Brown individuals in the different employment settings, as well as people who were in prison, specifically transgender people in prison who were addressing the conditions of their confinement. So as a civil rights attorney, I currently live in Oakley with my wife and our 2 dogs, Mamba and Maya. I identify as a Black queer woman, and I'm so happy to be here.
All right, next, Joel.
Hi, it's so nice to be here. Happy Pride. My name is Joel Madrid. I use he and they pronouns. I reside on the ancestral and colonized lands of the Lenni Lenape, also known as Philadelphia. I started my career in Baltimore City schools in special education about 18 years ago, and I've been in the talent space now for over 10 years in a variety of roles, most recently here at the KIP Foundation, where I am the Senior Manager of Talent Operations and Systems. The KIP Foundation provides support to the largest charter school network in the country. We're a part of a network of over 280 schools operating all across the country, predominantly in communities of color. And equity is one of our core values and is a key component of the work of our talent team. And I'm really excited to share more about that work and some of our learnings with you today as well.
And Stratton.
Hey, everybody. Stratton Politzer, he, him, with Equality Florida. And I guess our state has the distinction of being most responsible for the topic of today's panel, so I apologize for that. But I am the co-founder and deputy director. I've been doing this since the late 90s. And one thing about Equality Florida to mention is we are a state-based LGBTQ advocacy organization. And as those go, we're one of the larger ones in the country with a staff of 50, which we need every single one of those people right now because Florida is the front line, the crucible. We have both of the leading Republican candidates for president trying to outflank each other with crazy right-wing attacks. And unfortunately, Florida is not Las Vegas, and what happens in Florida does not stay in Florida. And so now we are seeing the proliferation of hundreds of these bills across the country. So here to report out on the news from the front, what we're doing to stop it, and really excited about the conversation about how companies can be engaged and inspiring and supportive of their employees in this really hostile atmosphere.
Thank you. And then finally, Nikki.
Apologies, too many screens, couldn't find my mouse. Nikki Gomez Whaley, she, her, Aya, and I am a proud member of the Planned Parenthood family, and I am their Equity and Diversity and Inclusion Director. Previously, I was the Equity Manager for Arizona School Boards Association, so doing training and governance and educating school board members across the state on the areas of equity and inclusion, which had included a curriculum that I created to specifically for board members to make systemic change. I'm also the mother of two. I have a daughter whose birthday is today, and then I have a son who is currently on an exchange, but he identifies as part of the queer community, and he is also not neurodivergent. And so I have the experience of not only working with youth for the last 20 plus years in the areas of education and mental health, but I also have the lived experience of being a parent of a young person in the school system today, as well as I serve on my governing board. I'm an elected official and have served on the governing board in a majority BIPOC community for the last 6 years. We were recently in the news nationally for making a stand on a partnership we had with a Christian university that had a strong anti-LGBTQ stance, and were subsequently sued for wanting to dissolve that partnership. So we were, the heat of the moment and as far as this debate with regards to schools and our youth. So coming with that experience and just a strong desire to help in any way that I can in both our employees, but then also, the families and the things that they're experiencing outside of our workplaces.
All right, thank you all so much. I'm going to hand it over to Jen.
All right. Sorry, having some trouble with mute. So we're here today, as I mentioned at the beginning, because we care and we see the harm that's being inflicted on LGBTQ plus communities across the US. Right now, 12 states have LGBTQ plus policies that overall are harmful. And those are shown on this map in burgundy, and 25 states have LGBTQ plus policies that are either negative or low equality. And those are shown in burgundy and red. And so to get a sense of who is here today, we just have who is here today in the states in which our employees reside. We have a quick poll for you. It should pop up. There it is. You'll have a minute to complete it, I think. And I should say it's a choose all that apply. It's not, you don't have to choose only one. Okay, so looking through the results, see that many of our participants are supporting folks in high overall policy states, and a pretty good chunk of our participants are supporting, almost half are supporting employees or have employees that are in either low overall policy states or negative overall policy states. And so if you want to move to the next slide, Mara, that we need to be talking about that, and that's important because we also see that 28% of the LGBTQ plus population lives in states with harmful policies, in those burgundy states on the previous map, and 40% live in states with negative or low equality LGBTQ plus policies. And as we saw in our poll, our employees also live in these states. And so it's likely that we're supporting employees that are living in states that are not LGBTQ plus friendly. And so in terms of what the laws look like and what they're targeting right now, what we're seeing in terms of the policies and laws that are being enacted, we're seeing that they target relationships and marriage. We're seeing that they target parental recognition and adoption. We're seeing that they provide religious exemptions that override LGBTQ plus rights. We're seeing that they target LGBTQ plus youth, that they target access to healthcare and gender affirming treatments, and that they make it difficult for us to identify as ourselves on documents. And so it's important, again, that we have these conversations, and even more important that we take action ourselves to increase inclusion and belonging within our organizations, within our communities, and within our own government. And so I'm going to pass it back to Mara now.
Yeah, so we're going to take the rest of our webinar to really start a discussion about how some of the national organizations that our panelists are a part of are supporting their employees in navigating the impact of legislation from all across the country. So we have 3 different areas, focus areas, that we're going to be asking questions in. So one will be navigating the changing landscape of state legislation. We know, and I think HR professionals know, that laws change all the time. Sometimes those are tax laws. Sometimes those are, laws around Social Security. And right now, these are laws that are really focused on the impact to the LGBTQIA community. Medical benefits and acknowledgements. So we want to ask a little bit about that. We're going to focus on some internal practices for employees, and then external practices for the communities that we all serve. So while we're asking questions, please feel free to drop your questions or comments into the chat. This is a recorded webinar, so if we can't get to your answers now, we're certainly going to follow up. And then our panelists can, if there is, if they have a moment, maybe responding to some of your questions and comments in the chat as well. So we're hoping this is a kind of a 360 kind of conversation. So, Jen, I think you're going to start with your first question.
Yep. So the first question we have a preface for, which is that many states with anti-gay laws also have laws that discriminate against other identities, such as laws that ban the discussion of critical race theory in schools. And so the first question is, what do you think is important to consider when supporting LGBTQ plus employees with intersecting identities? And Shauna or Nikki, would one of you like to kind of jump in first on that question?
Yes, no problem. This is Shauna Madison speaking. So this is a really great question, because taking an intersectional approach and an intersectional lens when it comes to LGBTQ employees is not a perhaps, it's not a maybe, it's a must. At this point, we're in 2023, and we've seen how a variety of laws and statutes impact the LGBTQ community, which are everywhere. We are literally in every facet of national and international spaces. And we're even on the right side. We're even in conservative Republicans, believe it or not. So we are everywhere. And so if you taking an intersectional approach in writing policies will allow your employees to see themselves in your organization. Using myself as an example, I'm a Black queer woman, originally from South Central. I'm a first-gen college and college graduate, first generation law graduate, and oftentimes I wear my hair in natural protective styles. Like, what does that mean for me as an employee when I walk into a space? It means that besides the traditional anti-harassment, anti-discrimination policies that most employers have, we have to think outside the box, right? What about the Crown Act? Even though it may not be mandatory in your state to follow that, why not embed that into your policies? And for those out there, the Crown Act it's a new law that's been passed and certain states have adopted, where it prohibits discrimination on the basis of hairstyles, braids, locks, twists. Oftentimes we see people get fired or not even allowed to work there because of their types of hairstyles. So taking an intersectional approach and seeing, folks are going to come in here come from a variety of different lifestyles, variety of different ways they want to present themselves. Let's embed the Crown Act into our policies, even though we don't have to. Another example is, like I said, I'm a first-gen college and lawyer, right? And so what about mentorship programs within these particular organizations? It could really go a long way to help the LGBTQ plus employee feel as if there's someone to help them guide them through the ins and outs of your organization. At this point, I've been in the game too long, so I'm now a mentor. But if my organization had a mentorship program, I'd be helping another Black queer woman from Los Angeles kind of navigate this field. And lastly, what I'll say, and then I'll hand it over to Nikki, is that be conscious of intersecting identities when you're writing policies, right? Say nursing employees instead of nursing mothers, because not every person who is nursing a child identifies as a mother or a person who is feminine. Let's have a pronoun policy, right? Just encourage people to put their pronouns in their signature line and say it whenever they go on to a space like this when they're meeting other people. Or take it a step further and have a gender transition policy. And I know that's something that's fairly new, but it's a policy that very clearly lays out what it would look like for an employee to transition at your organization and what things you offer to them. And so I can go in depth about that later, but these are just a couple of ways in which employers can support LGBTQ plus employees through an intersectional lens. Nikki?
Thank you. Those are all great suggestions. So one of the biggest things that I like to point out for intersectionality is the first and foremost is you don't always know the various identities that intersect, right? So sometimes you can see a race, sometimes you can't presume race, and then there's also disabilities that are both visible, but mostly invisible. And you also don't know their families. So I think one thing that people forget that when we're talking about employees, we are talking about our LGBTQ plus employees, but we're also talking about employees who may not be part of that community, but have loved ones that are. And increasingly with the changing demographics of our workforce, you're getting these Gen Zs and millennials that just want to work for a place that's inclusive, whether it impacts them or not. So when we're talking about this is not, we talk about the head and the heart. This is not just the right thing to do. It is the best thing to do in order to maintain a workforce. And it's going to be increasingly like this. So understanding that this first and foremost is intersectional in that it applies to both those within the community and those without, or with that are not within it. The other thing I want to say about the intersectionality is that we have to understand that when we're talking about EDI, when we're talking about marginalized and oppressed communities, that there's layers of oppression, right? And so for a long time, the LGBTQ space, despite being the riots at Stonewall and Marsha P. Jensen, has been dominated by white LGBT, white men, white women, gay, lesbian women. And so a lot of the rhetoric didn't really take in, or not a rhetoric, but a lot of the discussion and the discourse and the focus wasn't really on what it's like to be a trans Black woman. We know that the murder rates for trans Black women are astronomical and the hate crimes that are happening against them. So what does it mean to not only be part of this community that's targeted and stigmatized, but also disproportionately attacked and murdered? What does it mean to be a neurodivergent LGBTQ person who, with so much of the LGBT community and supports being focused on socialization and maybe bars and parties and things like that? My son, for example, is gender nonconforming and bisexual, and he is neurodivergent, and he does not feel comfortable in those spaces. So trying to find community for him has been challenging because he feels most comfortable online. And so what are we doing for our employees that may be neurodivergent, who aren't going to just come and out themselves, or may not want to just have, they might not want you to throw rainbows and make a big deal about them, right? They may need something else. And so I think it's really important that we understand that just like BIPOC is an umbrella, right? No one would ever say that the Black experience and the Latinx experience are the same, right? We can recognize that we have different experiences, though we both are people of color. So the LGBTQ plus umbrella is the same. Just because you are gay, or just because you're lesbian, or just because you are bisexual doesn't mean that you understand what it's like to be trans, and doesn't mean that you understand what it's like to be Black, neurodivergent, disabled, and gay. So there's a saying that we say in the BIPOC community that not all skin folk are kinfolk, meaning that, just because you're part of this umbrella doesn't mean that you are not capable of perpetuating harms, white supremacy culture, heteronormative culture. Same thing with this LGBTQ. We are seeing people within the LGBT community going after trans people right now. We have people, gay bars in Chicago, saying that they're not going to use Garth Brooks, go to his bar, or use his because he's using Bud Light and they worked with a trans person. We have lesbian women that are attacking trans athletes, saying that they're not real women. So we have to understand that intersectionality goes within the community as well. And I say all of that to just say, it is impossible for one person to know it all. So two things that I would recommend is, just like we did with the HIV crisis, it was universal protections, right? We didn't ask patients if they had HIV or not. We just implemented universal protections. The same should be true for our employees. Whether you think you have LGBTQ employees or not, implementing some of these things, like asking for pronouns, like offering gender affirming care in your healthcare coverage, like covering domestic partners, because a lot of people stopped covering domestic partners once marriage equality happened, and they only recognize married couples now. There are still many in the community that are still domestic partners and not married, and are not able to have benefits anymore because of people removing that and making it for married couples now. So what are the things that you can do proactively across the board without even knowing whether or not you have or don't have? Because the idea is, what is the environment that you're creating? And recognizing that even if you don't have anybody yet, you may. And even those that are in the straight community are going to be looking at you and saying, is this the type of organization that I want to work for?
I love that. thank you so much, both of you, for sharing. And I think that this goes really well with our next question. So, you're right, we can't all know everything. And so what advice would you give organizations that want to engage their LGBTQ staff and learn more about the support they need? And I think Joel and Paul are going to take on this question, and either one of you can go first.
Oh, thanks, Joel. So as Nikki said, I want to build off of something that Nikki said, and she said something to the effect of people in the LGBT community might not want all the rainbows thrown at them. And I think that's so true. And my first thing that I would say is don't assume that you know what we need. We are all different. So you need to figure out ways to get at all the differences within the community and your staff. So it's best, I think it's best if you or someone on your staff who share that identity can talk with your affinity group or employee resource group if you have one. You could also put out an all call where people can submit ideas anonymously, or either non-anonymously join a focus group. However, I also want to call out there is that what I've seen in practice is that sometimes these efforts fall flat because it essentially is outing people at work who don't want to be outed. So just want to be cautious about how you approach that, right? I want to say that specifically, to the people that we love dearly, our allies, who are allies for us, and much appreciate that. I do, seeing in practice again, allies unintentionally infiltrating spaces that are meant to be safe spaces for the LGBTQ community as well. So also just be explicit about what the space is for. If it's for people who share their identity, just name that, because a lot of times people want to support and again, just unintentionally disrupt some of the learning that could have been happening in those spaces. The other thing I'll say is that to be honest about what you can and can't do financially. I know, I work for a nonprofit. Finances always come up when we talk about benefits and things that we can offer to our staff. So if you can't offer something that you should be, just say it and say, we wish we could, but here's why we can't, so that your employees know that you see them and care about them. And then the last thing I will just throw out there is that there are some what I call performative actions, white rainbow washing your logo, putting out just a statement on social media that can be helpful to signal to staff and your potential staff about your values, but also just make sure that you're taking more systemic approach to support. Things like changing your policies and practices are going to go farther than just saying you support the community or putting your logo in a rainbow or creating a t-shirt, which I love t-shirts and I'll take all of them. But, we need to think more deeply about how to support our people. Joel?
Oh, thank you so much, Paul. So much of what folks are sharing today resonates really deeply with me. For instance, here at KIP as an organization, for us, it's really, we're engaging in a journey. It's not a single event. And one of the really important beginnings of our journey was really having the organization develop a really clear articulation around our stance on equity. So for instance, our equity office developed a culture and equity plan that centers BIPOC staff and their intersectional identities. From that organizational stance, we were then, and our talent team, able to take that and be able to expand our efforts to incorporate it into all of the efforts that we were doing to revise our policies. And by focusing on the most marginalized groups in our organization, what we've learned through this whole process is that it actually benefits everyone. The other thing that I want to mention is that it's really important to acknowledge that there's an entire ecosystem of support that we provide to our employees, which a lot of the work does reside in talent, but it's a lot broader than just the talent team. It's about the culture at the organization, in addition to like the policies or benefits or compensation structures that we have in place. And then the last two things I want to share is that the engagement has to be intentional. So throughout all of our journey, as we're like revamping our compensation system and implementing a new compensation system, we have working groups that are guiding a lot of this work, both in the development stage and in the implementation stage. And we were really intentional about setting up working groups that were overrepresented in key demographic areas, especially with BIPOC folks, LGBTQ staff, and women, and really like, centering the intersection of all of those identities, because we realize as an organization, our demographics are not where we want to be as an organization. So as we're implementing these new structures, including like policies and compensation system, it was really important for us to have those voices of folks at the table as we're developing all of these initiatives. And then the last thing is that it's really important to have all of our initiatives be informed by data. And so a couple of strategies that we've used to be able to collect data to inform a lot of our strategies is we partnered with an external consultant called Beloved Communities, who conducted an audit of all our employee handbook and a lot of our talent policies. And they held focus groups and looked at data from our employee engagement surveys. And in those focus groups, they really were able to get a sense not only of the specific policies, but also like the broader organizational culture shifts that needed to happen in conjunction with some of the work that we're doing with our employee handbook. And then we also added a way for LGBTQ staff to self-identify as LGBTQ in our employee engagement survey, and started disaggregating the results in that survey by those demographics and intersectionally as well, so that we could have better insight into the experiences of our queer staff. And then the last thing is we also use benefits data. So data, like for instance, at the KIP Foundation, we have like 1.3 dependents per employee, which is higher than the national average. Our benefits broker pulled that data for us, and it really helped give us insight into some of the benefits moves that we made for our benefits renewal, especially around family planning and reproductive health.
Thank you both. Appreciate those responses and want to elevate, I think, something that you both said around, and that also was shared in the comments, that it's important to make spaces so that we can hear the voices of different identities, and we want to make sure that we're not putting the disproportionate burden upon them to act on what's being heard, right? We need to be taking that on either as an HR team or as a leadership team, and taking that action so that we're not putting further burden on folks. And so I'm going to move us to our next question. Really, this question is what is your organization doing to be proactive when responding to changing laws? And Nikki or Stratton, would one of you like to kind of start?
Sure. Hi, this is Nikki Gomez-Whaley. So I'm coming from Arizona. And so while we're not Florida, we like to say we're trying to, we're working for it, unfortunately. So, and it's a very interesting space. I would not call us purple. I refer to us more of a tie-dye state. So what I mean by that is we have areas that are bright pink. We've got areas that are bright blue, and then bright red, bright blue, and then we've got peaks and purples throughout our state. And so it is a challenge when you're working in a state that there are some laws that try to limit it, or where there's not laws, you have unfriendly legal systems that are not willing to hold people accountable to the laws that are in place for protections. So one of the things is both a school board leader that I've had to do, and as an EDI director, is work with organizations to embed equity system wide. And so what I mean by that is they can, oftentimes lawmakers are not that bright. when it comes to the specifics of the things they're making laws for, right? They're relying on their constituents or mouthpieces or different people to feed them information because they're making laws on everything from, roads to environment to whatever. And so they don't always make laws that are the best, right? And oftentimes it misses, it just kind of sits on the rhetoric, but there's still a lot you can do. I think laws are mostly used as chilling effects to try to keep people from doing anything at all. And so in Arizona, what we've done is, okay, if there's a law that says that we can't talk about particular things with sexuality, then we just need to get a permission slip. So I think the first thing that I would say to be proactive when it comes to this stuff is really understand what the law specifically says, and then look for what you can do, right? Because so often people use, oh, there's a law, and so we just can't do anything because they're afraid of being sued or they're afraid of backlash. But I think the first thing you need to do to be proactive is, what does it actually say? Like, get the law, get with your attorney. What does it actually say? And can you continue to do the things that you want to do? Can you continue to add protections? So, for example, we don't have gender identity is not a protected class. Sexual orientation was not a protected class in Arizona. And so you could still terminate based on that. And so one of the things that I did when I joined my school board is I specifically included gender identity, expression, and sexual orientation into our policies. Even when the Supreme Court said that sex now included that, our policies still only read sex. And so most people were only interpreting it as sex. So being explicit in the language that, and I got pushback from our attorney, like, well, that's going to cause people to come after us. I said, you agree with me that this includes this, right? That sex includes gender identity, expression. Yes, but I mean, it includes it. The policy's there. So do we really have to spell it out? Yes, we really need to spell it out. And so sometimes you are going to get pushback. And that's why I said it's important for us to not just trust that, but to ask specifically what the law is, and then ask specifically if what you're trying to do is against the law, right? Because sometimes they'll use that to, lawyers have their job is to not get you sued. It's not necessarily to do what's right by people. So making sure that you have the backbone and the support of your organization to do that. I think that's first and foremost. Secondarily, I think in order to be proactive, one of the things that we're doing is we're writing them in explicitly. So, for example, we do cover domestic partnerships, even though, a lot of companies switched to marriage, and a lot of insurance companies pushed employers to move to just married couples. We maintain our domestic partnership. We also, as Planned Parenthood, provide gender affirming care. And because we provide gender affirming care, our insurance coverage also covers gender affirming care. We ask people voluntarily once they're in onboarding to share any identities that they have. So their racial identity, their LGBTQ, either sexuality or gender preference. We ask for their names that they want to be listed, even if it's not legally changed. So we still have to make their payroll and certain things be in their legal name, but we do everything that we can to change their affirming names or their preferred names on all internal documents and communications. We do collect this data. We didn't always, but we do collect this data so that we can then begin to separate out response rates when it comes to wellness, when it comes to engagement. We also make sure that we include intersectional representation in our clinics. And we make sure that when clients come in, we're collecting their information if they want to share it. So I think data and information is power. So I guess I'll sum that up by really understanding what the law says, asking yourself if your policies are explicit, not like, well, it's meant to include that. Being explicit is important not only for the employees, but for managers, because what I see oftentimes is that there's executives are like, yes, we're all about this. There's staff that want it. And then the middle management piece have different interpretations or don't quite understand how to execute it. And so that's why it goes back to the system, is this has to be something that is embedded in your payroll policies, in your HR policies, in your operation policies, even in your vendor policies. We do a thing where we check our vendors out, and if they have explicitly discriminatory language, we will not partner with them. So I think it's important for us as the people to really ask the questions and not just go with the status quo.
Yeah, so to jump into the conversation and speaking, and I'll try to balance this both for folks who are trying to support employees in the really hostile states, and if you're fortunate enough to be in a state that has supportive laws right now. But one thing to understand in the places like Florida and Arizona, where these terrible laws are passing, is that there is no safe zone anymore. We have a lot of cities in Florida that have passed an amazing array of pro-LGBTQ policies that have top marks on HRC's pro-equality index. But the laws they're passing in Tallahassee have the same impact in those communities that, in Key West and in Tampa and Orlando and Miami, that they have in more conservative rural communities. So there's no safe harbor. And as an employer, remembering that at the end of the day, those employees have to go home. If you ask them to drive across the state right now in Florida and they have to stop at a rest area, they may have to make a decision about whether or not they're going to use a bathroom, since now all government buildings have bathrooms segregated based on sex assigned at birth. And that includes almost every airport in Florida, for example. And so just understanding the pressures that employees are under out there in the real world, and having I agree, information is crucial, because these laws are written in a way with great ambiguity, which is intended to be both a sword and a shield. It's a sword because they write these laws so broadly that they know people will interpret them in the most expansive ways out of a fear of breaking the law. And so we're seeing school districts canceling LGBTQ History Month and peeling safe zone stickers off of classroom doors when that's not explicitly listed in the legislation. But then it's a shield, because when we get ready to go to court and say, we told you it would do this, then the folks behind these bills say, well, the law didn't say that. It doesn't say gay in the Don't Say Gay bill. Don't say LGBTQ bill, right? Drag queens aren't mentioned in the bill that's designed to terrorize drag performers and the venues who host them. So getting out the real information, we've put together, and I'm happy to share, a comprehensive resource on where the 6 horrible laws that passed in Florida, what they do and what they don't do. And I think making sure your employees have that data, including when you ask people to travel somewhere like Florida. We did issue a travel advisory, first time we've done anything like that, which doesn't mean don't come to Florida, but it does mean if you come prepared. And if you're asking an employee to travel here, you sure better make sure you understand the risks you're asking them to take and that they're okay with those risks. And, and it's not just LGBTQ, the NAACP has issued a travel advisory for Florida. LULAC has issued a travel advisory for Florida. Just to back up a second, I do think when we talk about intersectionality, an important approach is let's always talk about how we are facing a range of these hostile bills. It's not just targeting the LGBTQ community, that these anti-immigrant laws, these laws that make it illegal to teach the true history of racial bias in our country, that we should always speak about them collectively. And have, if you can, have the flexibility for the folks on your team who are being the most impacted right now. Recognizing just the incredible mental health pressure being put on transgender Floridians right now. I mean, many people are fleeing this state, but most can't, right? But many are, but most can't. And if they have to stay, what can we do to acknowledge and support them? For us, that means a much more expansive PTO policy right now, because people just need a break, But the other thing, and I'm glad, Nikki, that you identify as a parent, is parents are under pressure right now. If you have an LGBTQ child, what it's like for you, the concern sending those children to schools when you're reading headlines about terrible things that your school district is doing. And so then flipping forward to kind of what all of us can do, I think this is a moment where we have to have even greater visibility. Because the message embedded in all of these laws is, we don't think LGBTQ people should exist. And if you do exist, you better hide. And if you don't hide, we're going to punish you. And that is the message, the fearful message that's being put out in Florida. And so our response to that is, this is a moment to be more visible than ever. Like, this is a moment, And that means status quo, if your company is supportive, is not enough. This is a moment for your leadership to make it really clear that they stand with their LGBTQ employees. You know, to where a rainbow flag is no longer just an adornment at the mall during Pride Month. It is a symbol of solidarity and protest again. And these symbols have much, and so little things like that, taking action on behalf of trans people in a state, you know, in a neighboring state or just a headline state that are being impacted, doing that as a company would send a message. Right now, there's a fund in Florida. There's one, actually, it's all across the South, to provide $500 grants to transgender people whose healthcare has been interrupted. Like, pass the hat at work. What a message that would send to your staff about your values in this moment of crisis. And I apologize, I kind of jumped to question 3 there because I have to go to activism.
No, that's great. I really appreciate both of your insight into how you're supporting employees, and especially in the states that you're coming from. I think it's really helpful. And I think in thinking just about travel for employees and even for ourselves, I really appreciate that. We have about 8 minutes left, so we're actually going to combine some of the questions that we had. I hope that's okay with everybody. So I guess, you know, we've touched on this a little bit, and I'd love to hear a bit more about how you are supporting your staff, right, your employees at your organizations to really show up as their true selves, regardless of the state climate, regardless of where you live, regardless of where they live. I'm thinking a lot about Paul here, who has folks all over the country, and Joel really has folks, and Shauna, all over the country. So I'm thinking about benefits packages, like all the different ways that you are really making sure that your staff can show up as their true selves. And Paul, I'd love to throw it to you, and then Shauna and Joel, if we have a couple of minutes, to you as well.
Thank you. So yeah, I'll try to be as succinct as possible. One way is I, as a member of the community, try to model this regularly and recognize that I am in a position of power, and I take that with incredible responsibility. So in large settings, in whether it's public or internal, I always try to mention, my husband in casual conversations and in formal conversations, just to signal who I am and that it's okay to be out at NIMSY and in the spaces I'm in. Another way, if you're not part of the LGBT community, is to discuss the other identities that are salient to you. That signals that we value everything that you bring to the table. So whether you're neurodivergent or you are religious, and if it's okay in your organization to talk about religion, that always goes a long way by signaling you're bringing your whole self as well. And, I mentioned a little bit about examining policies earlier and what you can do. So I just wanted to share a couple of just concrete things that you can do is look at even your bereavement leave policy. A lot of the times those are explicit about who are they for, and it sometimes says, a spouse or things like that. We have expanded our bereavement to include bereavement leave for any family member or loved one. So loved one can be a friend, it can be a domestic partner, it can be whoever that person chooses to signal as a loved one. We also offer paid parental leave to all of our employees, no matter their sex, their gender identity, or the type of birth. So surrogacy, adoption, all are inclusive in our paid parental leave policy, and we don't differentiate how much leave you get based on any kind of those identity markers either.
Thank you, Paul, for starting that conversation. I am being in the HR and in-house space. I've looked deeply at what we can offer our employees in terms of benefits, especially our LGBTQ plus employees. And before you even get to benefits, by the way, you have to talk about salary. There's a huge wage gap in the LGBTQ plus community. And so the salary has to match. Thank you, Mara. The salary has to match and be competitive for that particular occupation and for that particular space. So let's start with salary. I do a lot of equal pay. I do a lot of pay equity workshops. So that's first. Second is, in California, we're required to cover registered domestic partners for folks the same as we do spouses, but we can also cover unregistered domestic partners, which are just literally the same standard, but for folks who have not registered with whatever the state they're in. That's important because not everyone wants to get married. Not everyone wants to get married to their partner they've been with for 52 years because it's just extra paperwork and they don't care or they don't want to, even if it's legal. Covering unregistered domestic partners can really change the way in which we cover our folks, especially in polyamorous relationships. We're thinking about LGBTQ people plus globally. Now let's talk about choosing the right medical policies. Every single healthcare policy you choose, if you can afford it, should include assisted reproductive technology like IVF, IUI, ICI, and it should include transitional related care for folks who want to physically transition while they're at your employment. If for some reason you can't cover that because it's too expensive, then there's something called a HRA policy. It's a health reimbursement account that allows folks to pay for all of these things and then you reimburse them. At NCLR, we have a $10,000 reimbursement for ART and then a $20,000 reimbursement per employee for transitional related care. And that's a tax benefit to the employer. So it works both ways. I'd also say, like Paul and Stratton has said, a generous PTO policy, a generous ADA accommodations policy, because if someone's experiencing generalized anxiety disorder or major depressive disorder due to these anti-LGBTQ spaces and these laws and legislation, you should open up your ADA accommodations policy to address that and to allow people to, I don't know, see their therapist in the middle of a day, right? Instead of waiting to the end at 5, 6, 7 o'clock to do so, to go see a doctor or to literally rest and take a nap because they're inundated with anti-LGBT stuff going on everywhere. The last things I'll say is implement impromptu mental health days. After Roe v. Wade passed or was overturned, NCLR shut down for the day. We're like, we cannot go on. This is not good. And keeping that in mind is making sure that you understand anti-abortion laws are anti-LGBTQ laws. So some organizations are even covering abortions for people who can't have it in their state and they need to travel to another state. So they cover that even though that healthcare in that particular state won't cover it. People are also going a step further in providing a relocation stipend for transgender employees who are in states like Florida or, you know, these other deep anti-LGBTQ spaces, so they can move and work remotely comfortably without fear of, I don't know, death while they're trying to work. So having a generous parental leave policy, you know, as Paul has already stated, but there's a variety of things people can do. You just have to think a smidge outside the box and then just utilize the resources you already have.
Just one last thing to add on to what Shauna and Paul shared, because I know we're trying to wrap up. For us, a lot of times it's really about access as well. So making sure that, like, you know, if you have a parental leave policy and you're requiring folks to take PTO to, you know, be on parental leave, look at your PTO policy and make sure that you're offering employees enough PTO to be able to take paid parental leave for 12 weeks. Same thing with the insurance design, making sure the out-of-pocket maximums are low enough to allow employees to access like the more expensive, you know, procedures that often come along with, you know, gender affirming care and stuff like that. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you
Go
all
ahead,
so
Dave.
much for joining us today. As you leave, please take our survey, gift us with your feedback, and let us know how we did. If you found this useful, if there are any other questions you'd like answered, we will send out the recording as well as any resources that were discussed today, as well as probably a few more later this week. So please keep an eye on your email. And just a huge shout out and thank you to all of our amazing panelists today. Thank you all so much for being here, for sharing this space and sharing your expertise. We just can't thank you enough. And thank you to Jen and Mara and our LGBTQIA plus ERG for pulling this panel together. So thank you all so much, and please take good care of yourselves.